So what if I told you the government has your baby's DNA? Newborns are routinely screened for a series of genetic diseases, and in some states, that DNA is stored even without your consent.
Strange fruit hanging from the poplar trees.
Vaxdesign is developing a clinical trial in a test tube that simulates the human immune response in a high-throughput method. This simulated immune response enables rapid, clinically relevant predictions about the efficacy of immunotherapies and vaccines, which can dramatically reduce the cost and time required to bring these products to market. Our immune simulation method has 4 steps: blood collection via apheresis, the vaccination site module, the lymphoid tissue equivalent module, and functional assays. The first step in our process is blood collection and preparation. In collaboration with Florida's blood centers, we collect white blood cells from pre-screened donors using leukapheresis. We take the white blood cells and process them into either purified PBMCs or isolated subpopulations of the PBMCs, such as monocytes, T cells, and B cells.
Already has one of the world's biggest DNA databases, holding 4.5 million samples of genetic material. British police also support a proposal for a DNA registry to cover the whole of the European Union, with the addition of an EU-wide automated finger recognition system.
Senior medical correspondent Elizabeth Cohen talking about this and the controversy it's sort of bringing about. Oh, right, because parents don't know. I think we parents have no idea that our kids' DNA is stored in state labs, sometimes for decades. I know I have 4 children, and I didn't know that. I think a lot of parents know that our kids get tested for certain genetic diseases, but we don't necessarily know that that DNA is kept in a state lab with our child's name attached.
At the FBI crime labs in New York, forensic science is uncovering the kind of genetic information that could be used to target population groups. Identifying individual people from samples of hair or blood has become possible by looking at human DNA. The National FBI database contains over 100,000 samples. They use them to analyze particular sequences in the DNA called junk DNA. Variations in these sequences now allow the FBI to distinguish one person from another.
Both these journalists have been in touch with UN and World Health Organization officials, including a scientist who's dealt with Ebola virus and HIV/AIDS in Africa, and it's their conclusion, these scientists who they've spoken to, that this is a very unusual form of flu because it looks like it is a product of some gene splicing. The flu contains elements of bird flu, 2 forms of human flu, and various forms of swine flu. To them, it doesn't look like this is naturally occurring. The other thing is the target for this flu, as opposed to other flus, it's not the very young and the very old, it's people between the ages of 20 and 45. And the other thing is, people are not contracting this from pigs. The National Pork Council here in America says pigs are not being infected. This is human-to-human contact, so people who either eat pork or are exposed to pigs are not getting this flu. Very unusual, and of course the scientists are very alarmed by the way it's being spread and the speed at which it's being.
He's President Bush's 9th cousin once removed. started. President Lincoln was President Bush's 7th cousin 5 times removed, and Bush shared more than just a ballad with John Kerry. That's right, they're 9th cousins twice removed. Look at that. There's also royalty in the Bush bloodline. Princess Diana was Bush's 11th cousin twice removed. And then there's this bombshell.
Poplar
Sure, she may have been singing to JFK, but what about GWB? He is, after all, her 9th cousin 3 times removed. Even the eyebrows. The eyebrows have the same eyebrows. He's also related to Playboy founder Hugh Hefner, even Pocahontas, and Vlad the Impaler. Trace the family tree far enough, and you get Madonna, Celine Dion, and Tom Hanks.
The second step is the construction of the vaccination site module, which mimics human skin or peripheral tissue for representation of innate responses. We prepare 96 well plates seated with a collagen layer covered with a human cell endothelium. Each of the wells is effectively one human test cell.
This equation has 4 factors, a little bit of multiplication. So you've got a thing on the left, CO2, you want to get to 0. And that's going to be based on the number of people, the services each person's using on average, the energy on average for each service, and the CO2 being put out per unit of energy. So let's look at each one of these and see how we can get this down to 0. Probably one of these numbers is going to have to get pretty near to 0. Now that's back from high school algebra, but let's take a look. First, we've got population. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%. Now, the world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
For nearly 4 years, Racheli Mangoli has been running a youth center in one of Israel's poorer communities. 45 Ethiopian families live here, but throughout that entire time, only one Ethiopian baby was born in this neighborhood, and that alarmed Racheli.
Because I smell something not good. I know about the discrimination here. When I'm going with the children, I feel this. Even when I'm going to buy something in the super, one woman said to me, I don't understand how can you standing near people like this. When they give me money, I'm going and washing my hands.
After some investigation, Racheli discovered many of the Ethiopian women, keen not to get pregnant while setting up life in a new country, had been placed on the controversial contraceptive Depo-Provera, a drug few Israeli women have heard of, let alone use. This woman was first put on it 4 years ago and underwent repeated injections every 3 months. She says it's left her with such terrible pains in her hands and back, she can no longer work. She insists she was never told about its side effects or offered an alternative. Like many Ethiopians in Israel, she's afraid she'll be deported if she questions the authorities.
But it is the very technology that would be needed to identify and kill specific groups of people.
The work that's been done in the pharmaceutical companies in particular, looking for genetically targeted and genetically specific drugs, pharmaceutical agents to treat diseases, is of course the closest example of actually using and targeting that genetic knowledge into specific human beings.
The British Medical Association believe that in the next 10 years, a lethal germ might be created that could select its victims by genetic characteristics. A biological agent that could successfully wipe out entire groups in society. The world's first ethnic weapon. mechanism that could target specific people would mark the coming of age of biological weapons. For the first time, there would be no risk of infection to the aggressor. More useful than a nuclear bomb, it would leave land, buildings, and your own troops untouched. And as the proliferation of nuclear technology has shown, once the knowledge is available, it is almost impossible to contain.
Investigation and inquiry there. Dr. Bitten, do you believe an official investigation into this issue needs to take place?
But the question is, of course, what is official? Well, yes, of course, these are shocking statistics, but what is more important is the way by which it's going to be conducted, because the problem is that if we're again and again looking for official, you know, racist instructions to... That would not work. But what I'm looking for is, for example, thinking about doctors that think that, for example, just a second please, that for Ethiopian women it is better for them not to have children. This is something that doctors should have to think themselves if that was something that they would have done for white, Jewish, Israeli women as well.
Dr. Beaton, if you will...
Even if they think that they're working for the best interest of that patient, they still have to ask themselves, is that exactly what they would do for Jewish women as well?
All right. After you have finished, Dr. Beaton, and you allow me to put in a word, I think we all agree that racism should not take place, and we are fighting racism daily and where we think it exists. I do not, and I emphasize, I do not think that the problem you allude to is a major problem in Israel. There are other serious problems of racism in Israel.